Welcome to Skyler Jarvis Media.
The man, the myth, the legend.
Skyler Jarvis.
What's up, everybody? This is the Skyler Jarvis Show. I'm your host, Skyler Jarvis, and today we're doing another boss rant. Now, before I get started, I want to shout out the professional surfer for shouting me out in a video. It is his latest one at the moment. It's a Tuesday night discussion in the cottage. He talks about braille writer repair. He talks about a bunch of cool other stuff. He's got a bunch of videos on his channel. Go check him out and support him. Thank you for the support, by the way. I seen the part where you called me out, man, and I just want you to know it's much appreciated. And I really want to get to know you, man. You are the next generation of GMS students, man. You and your schoolmates are the next generation. We passed it down to you, man. So keep on making them videos. And also, I really want you to do a tour of the cottage and Lineberry. I know they said they redid Lineberry. So, yeah, man. Give me some updates on that, man. So, shout out Professional Surfer. Shout out Pablo. He knows the Professional Surfer, a.k.a. Chasin'. He knows some of the people I used to go to school with that were starting around the time I was ending. So, shout out to every one of y'all. Thank you. Thank you so much for the support. So, today, I'm going to talk about Stephen King. Now, for those of you who don't know, Stephen King is an American author. His first book was published in 1974. Some of his most famous books include, and movies, some of y'all have seen the movies, but for this episode, I'll be talking about the books. So, if you know about the movies, and I'm talking about the books, just try to follow along the best you can. And if you're interested in reading the books and you've seen the movie and you don't want to get spoiled about the book, come back to this video when you've read some of the books I'm talking about. So, some of his most well-known books include It, The Shining, The Stand, Pet Sematary, Cujo. The list goes on. This man has written so many books. And I've always wanted to do a dedicated podcast episode to just talking about Stephen King, man. Because I love him as an author, especially his earlier stuff, man. He has a way of putting you in the world, putting you in the world he is building up. And a lot of people say that his books are overlong, but I think even his longest book could have went on for more pages and I would have been fine. So, firstly, how did I get into Stephen King? So, this was around the time I was going to GMS, and at the time I hadn't read it, but I'd heard of The Shining. And anybody knows that Stanley Kubrick movie, Here's Johnny! And the all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. That movie is a freaking classic, man. But No, actually, it was going into COVID. It was right when they had. It was right when they had sent us home. So I think it was that week or a few weeks after where I started looking into a lot of horror movies. We had Netflix at the time, and I started watching a lot of horror movies, like heavy rotation. I was just, if they had descriptive video, I was watching one after the other, bang. So, just one after the other. So, eventually I heard about The Shining. And I wanted to check the book out. I've always been that type of person, like, I really want to know how this story pans out in the book compared to the movie. So I dipped my toes into The Shining. I didn't read it all the way through, but it sparked my interest in Stephen King. And about almost a year later, I decided to read it. I was like, okay, I've heard about this one. I've heard a lot of people talk a lot of good things about it. Anybody and their mama has heard about the clown and the storm drain thing. And I wanted to see what the story was about. So I read it, and oh man, that was when I realized I really wanted to I wanted to explore more of his books. So right after I got done with it, I picked up his second longest book, The Stand. Well, I read these on Audible. So I breezed through those two. And The Stand, and like everybody in my family, they all think I just read the same book over and over again. But that's a daggone good one, I'm telling you. The Stand is a great book. So that was my main book over the whole year. But in between that time, I was reading a little bit of Salem's Lot. I was reading a little bit of 11/22/63. I was reading The Shining. I finally sat down and read The Shining all the way through. And what a book. What a book. What a book. And I dipped my toes into The Dark Tower, which that is one of his best stories as well. The Dark Tower, all the Dark Tower books it's a great adventure, and especially when you get to books 2 or 3, you're going to have a really good time with it. A lot of people don't, whenever they see the gunslinger doesn't really give you a lot of answers, they tend to want to skip that book. And I don't think that's a good idea. But anyway, I started dipping my toes into all of that stuff. And I was having such a good time reading it. And one of the more consistent themes in his books is that monsters are scary, but the really scary shit is what the human beings do to each other. For example, in It, Henry Bowers terrified me more than It. And don't get me wrong, It scared me several times. But what Henry Bowers does to the Losers Club, man, that is horrifying. Downright horrifying. So, man, there's so many things I could talk about with Stephen King and how how his books have really shaped my interest in reading. And speaking of Stephen King, one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this right now was there's a new movie for Salem's Lot that's coming out. It's coming out on October 3rd on HBO Max. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do with that. And how much they change from the book to the movie. And how much they, stayed faithful to the book. So I'm kind of that guy where, like, I don't mind if they change things so much as they, try to at least stay consistent with the book, the characters, all that, but just don't change the story as a whole. And speaking of good, firstly, I want to talk about some good adaptations before I get into my favorite books. Favorite adaptations, movie adaptations, TV show adaptations, it doesn't matter. So, The Shining, this one is a lot of people's favorite, and for good reason. This is a 1980 film by Stanley Kubrick, and he changed a lot from the story, but he made it into his own in such a way that, like, the Overlook is synonymous with, Hollywood, and, oh my gosh, I'm trying to figure out how to explain it. It's got a timeless feel to it. Like, you could sit and watch that in 1980, and it would be cool. And then you watch it like 40 years later. I can't believe it's that old. But he made the Overlook and just the overall feel of the hotel more kind of like quiet, and the Overlook was more disorientating, and it was, there was so many things that the twin girls aren't in the book, actually. The ones that say, come play with us forever and ever and ever. There's no here's Johnny moment. There's no axe through the door. And at the end of the book, the hotel blows up. It doesn't, Jack doesn't freeze in a snow maze. Speaking of, there's no hedge maze in the book. There are hedge animals, though, and they move. Man, that is creepy. Every time I've read that chapter in the book, gave me just chills. Every freaking time. But the book and the movie are both just fantastic in their own rights. Salem's Lot. I haven't actually watched this adaptation all the way through. Speaking of Salem's Lot, a lot of people consider the 1979 adaptation, which actually was the second movie adaptation in Stephen King's career. I think it was originally meant for a TV series, and then they made it into a movie later on. But from what I've seen of it, it's pretty faithful to the original work. And by the way, I've just finished Salem's Lot, the book. You know, I've dipped into it occasionally, but I haven't finished it until now. It's a good read. I'll talk about that later in the podcast. But what I have seen of this 1979, why do I keep wanting to say 1990? 1979 movie adaptation, Barlow is... he's way different than the book. You know, in the book, he's more described as a nice-looking gentleman. In the 1979 film, he just looks more like a monster, straight-up monster, vampire. So, one thing I did like about the movie was that it took time to develop the town as a whole, just like the book does, and the book takes that to a whole new level. So, Salem's Lot 1979, that's my only thoughts on that as of yet. I haven't finished the whole series yet. I need to. I really want to, especially now that the new movie is coming out. Now, this is going to be one I'm going to talk about, the 1994 excuse me, the 1994 TV miniseries on ABC, and then I'm going to talk about the 2020 adaptation. And you know, anybody in my family knows this is my favorite book adaptation, whatever it is. The Stand, 1994. A lot of people don't like that one, but I will say, man, it was really faithful to the book. I mean, as about as faithful as you could get on a TV channel back then. You know, you couldn't really get away with a lot of the graphic stuff and some of the language in that book that you might find in, say, like the CBS series 2020 version. And I like the fact that the 1994 miniseries took its time. It didn't... One thing... I'm going to kind of talk about the 1994 and 2020 when in the same breath. But what I did not like about the 2020 edition is that it jumped all over the place. You were always trying to figure out what the heck is going on. How did Larry get here? How did such and such get there? And it was always jumping around, and it didn't really take time to build the characters. This 1994 adaptation did that. And whereas the 2020 miniseries, I feel like the 2020 miniseries was just there to kind of try to realize some of the scenes that didn't make it to the ABC version that, you know, for obvious reasons, they just kind of compiled it all up into one and then made, you know, fit the story into it and it jumping around. But I did not care for it. I would sit and watch the 1994 miniseries again, and I'll watch the 2020 one again, but that is just my main gripe with that. So those are my favorite movie adaptations, and of course, Stand By Me. I haven't read the book version to that though, but I have watched the movie, and the movie is so good, so good. And I have heard that it's actually one of the most faithful adaptations to one of Stephen King's works ever made. So, I mean, if that, I don't know what would. So, favorite books. The Dark Tower 3. I'm going to start off with some that I haven't talked about already. And the Dark Tower books 1 and 2 were your starting place, basically. And for those of you guys who have seen the Dark Tower movie, it is horrible. It is so bad. They didn't get any of the characters right. They just tried to scramble everything into one hour film. And if anything they should have done with it, they should have made it into a TV series if they were going to do anything with the Dark Tower. You just can't fit all 7 of those books in the same freaking movie. This is not going to happen. And I've heard Mike Flanagan's going to do a version of it. And I know Mike Flanagan is very faithful to a lot of Stephen King material. So the Dark Tower 1 and 2 is basically your starting place. By the way, for those of you who haven't read the Dark Tower, if you are interested, come back to this video when you've read it. So the Dark Tower 3 is when the adventure starts happening. This is when the characters that were introduced in the first 2 books are starting to take action. They're starting to get their shit together. And I'll just say the adventure in this one, it's like one thing happens after another, and you're always holding on to your seat, wondering what is going to happen next with that one. And going on into the Dark Tower 4, so the Dark Tower 3 ended on a cliffhanger, a very, very abrupt cliffhanger. And for those of y'all Stephen King fans who had to wait in the 90s when these Dark Tower books were coming out, it was 6 years in between Dark Tower 3 and 4. And 4 finished the cliffhanger up. And then it went into a segue of Roland's past. But by the way, Roland is the main character. So that one is a good one too. I'm not going to spoil anything for you, especially if you haven't read The Dark Tower 1 and 2. You're not going to know what the heck I'm talking about if I get into conversation with them. But those are 2 of my favorite Dark Tower books. Some of the best moments in the series from those books, in my opinion, come out of those 2. So, let me talk about The Shining a little bit more, the book, and more differences between the book and the movie. So, Book Jack is more of a caring father. He's trying to stop drinking. You know, he's been sober for, I think it was like a few months up until the book takes place. And then, you know, he loves his son. He really loves his son. And in the movie, he just seems like a dick from day one. He seems like this. He seems like he's crazy from day one. And the book develops Jack's character a whole lot more. Same thing with Wendy. I did like that movie, but I do not like Wendy in the movie. She's whiny the whole time, man. It's like she easily gets scared by Jack. And in the book, you know, yes, I mean, she kind of has her moments, but she's more stronger. as a female character. You know, she's motivated by protecting her son, motivated by the fact that she knows the real Jack. She knows Jack is trying to, you know, but at the same time, she's worried because of something that happened in the book that Jack did, and she don't put up with no shit in the book. You know, this book is really relevant to some of my personal, you know, it's a book that's more personal to me because of some subjects that are talked about. But you see Jack's descent into madness. I mean, oh man. So room 237 in the movie is 217 in the book. And that chapter, man, oh my gosh. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. And the whole Red Room. I honestly wish more people would have read the whole Red Room reveal before they watched that movie, with just the kid going, you know, have his thumb writing within his mom's lipstick. Red Rum. Red Rum. Red Rum. Oh my gosh, I wish people would have read that before they watched it. Because in the book it's just like, bam. It was like it was hidden in plain sight. And the scene in the book, I could just picture it being in a movie. I honestly wish they would remake The Shining. And I mean, a lot of people wouldn't like that idea, but you know, let's face it, you're not gonna even compare to Stanley Kubrick's movie or the Stephen King book. But I would really like to see that the Red Rum scene in the book brought to film. I honestly would, because that's easily as terrifying as the Red Rum reveal in the book or in the movie. So, yeah, The Shining, that's a good book. That is a good book. If you really want something that isn't going to overwhelm you as far as length goes, this is going to be one of the ones you're going to start out with. The Shining, Salem's Lot, Pet Sematary. Salem's Lot's a little bit longer, but you know, not by much. Not by much. Speaking of Pet Sematary, that's a good one. Pet Sematary. I read this before my mom down the hill died. I haven't read it since, but one thing that really stuck out to me is the fact that he does not gloss over the grief and the hurt in that book. It is grim. I'm telling you, man. It's one of them books you won't forget. It creepy, just. Oh man, the little boy, in the movie and in the book really just creeps me out. Zelda is freaking terrifying. Oh my. Ugh. Victor Pascal. He is terrifying. He gets killed at the start of the book, and then he comes back in a dream to tell Lewis about the pet cemetery and try to warn him not go there, and then their cat dies. And then, by the way, if you haven't seen Pet Sematary, at least if you haven't seen the movie, go back and watch it before you get on this video. So, yeah, man, that one's terrifying. And there was a scene that really got me when I read it. And oh my gosh, I'm getting chills thinking about it. It's a scene at the airport where the family, this is near the last half of the book, but it's where the wife, or his wife and his daughter, are going to stay with their grandparents, their dad's parents, and the little girl tells her mama that she had a bad dream that dad was gonna do something, and she didn't know what. Oh my gosh, that book is terrifying. Oh my gosh. That's one of his better ones for sure. And fun little fact, Stephen King didn't want to publish it because he thought it was too dark. And his publisher got it out and was like, "No, we're publishing this thing. It is great." Salem's Lot. So this is going to be one of them good Halloween reads. It feels like a Halloween tale or something in the book. At least in the book, it does to me. So, fun little fact. Also, my mama thought this book was about witches, and the vampires. This is before vampires were sexy and loving, and this was before your Twilights and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. This was before all of that, and it was heavily influenced off of Count Dracula, Bram Stoker's book. So, Salem's Lot is about a writer. His name is Ben Mears. He comes to the town doing research on a mysterious evil house by the name of the Marston House, where a guy named Hubie Marston hung himself in one of the bedrooms. And anyway, Ben goes in as a kid on a dare. You know how kids are. And he takes one thing from the Marston house, and he's meant to take two. One from the kitchen and then one from the bedroom where he hung himself. And he goes in the bedroom and he sees Hubert Marston hanging there. And so anyway, he comes back to Salem's Lot and tries to buy the Marston house, but apparently some mysterious person has bought it. And eventually you find out his name is Kurt Barlow, and his partner, Straker. So they eventually infect the whole town, and at the end of the book, they're trying to find out how to kill Barlow. And I'm not going to spoil it for you, but they eventually kill Barlow, and then the vampires still won. They came back to kill them after they killed Barlow. So that one was a good book. I honestly enjoyed that one, and that was his second book overall. 11/22/63 is good. I haven't read all of that one, but I need to, man. I've heard a lot of people say that it's a really good book. And I've watched the 2016, I think it was, the Hulu series. That was good. And, of course, The Stand. You knew I was going to talk about this one. This is the book that really got me interested. This was the one was like, okay, I know I really like this author. I'm going to try to read everything I possibly can from him. And the story is so... It's a journey. And I know a lot of people are, they kind of feel daunted by the length of it. But I'm telling you, once you get started, the pages breeze by. And it takes you in. Just like a lot of these books I'm talking about right now do the same thing for me. They just take you into that world. And The Stand did that on so many levels. From the collapse of society, seeing how society collapses after the super flu hits, and how the government is starting to react, and how they're trying to shut down any information. Kind of, a lot of people when COVID hit started, oh man, this is so much like The Stand. And even some of my friends, like I've asked them about it, and they've been like, yeah, when we seen COVID, we was like, man, this looks like something from The Stand. And even though I feel like The Stand really hasn't, apart from the 1994 miniseries, but we need something, that actually is going to do the book justice in the modern age. But seeing as The Stand hasn't really got a movie premiere or nothing like that, it's still really popular in the culture. Like, there's certain things from it, like MOON. The mentally disabled guy that spells everything MOON, Tom Cullen. Oh man, he's a good character. Nick Andros. I really liked the Nick Andros, the parts of the book where it was in Nick's point of view, because he was deaf, and even though I'm not deaf, I can relate to having to just, for me, switch that to the eyes, not the ears and the mouth. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of people in the world just looked over him. And then when this plague hit, he ends up being one of the most important people in the committee. When they form their committee in Boulder, he ends up being one of the most important people to the group. And yeah, he's a big part of that story. He's the heart. He was... I really enjoyed reading about Nick. And whenever they have to send Tom Cullen out to the West, oh my gosh. It's hard to watch in the 1994 miniseries, and it is harder to read in the book. I'm telling you, man, oh my gosh, that is a sad moment. But eventually he comes back, so Thank the Lord for that. The last one I'm going to talk about is It. Now, a lot of people have just seen the movie, the more recent 2017-2019 double film, or they've seen the 1990 miniseries. And they're both good. I like all of those movies. I like both of the modern ones, and then the 1990 miniseries was pretty good. But I always tell everybody, and this is with any of these really, if you want the ultimate tale of It, you're going to want to go for the book. That is the tale of It. And there are some scary moments. There's in-between moments. There's nostalgic moments, things that'll bring you back to your childhood. And that's one thing I like about Stephen King's work, is that he makes his characters so human. And they act like normal human beings do. They have everyday lives. They have home issues. They have school issues, bullying, the whole 9 yards. Mike gets bullied by Henry Bowers. And, I mean, it's a great example of the monsters being scary, but the humans are scarier, thing I was talking about earlier in this episode. And honestly, if you ask me what my favorite Stephen King book would be, it would depend on what day you ask me. And by the way, there's so many more of his books than what I've talked about in the podcast. And they're all, there's some that's in between. There's some good, some not so good. But there's all kinds of moments in it that just make for this great story. So if you were to ask me what my favorite book from him would be, it would depend on what day you ask me, because it honestly flip-flops between it and The Stand. If you ask me when I'm into it, I would say it, or The Stand, vice versa. But there are so many more of his books that I haven't read that maybe I'm missing out on, or if there's anything by him that that you think I should listen to or watch a movie of, put it down in the comments. I'm always willing to read comments, and I try to respond to every one of them. So, yeah, drop your ideas down. I really want to see you guys' opinions on what Stephen King book you think I should read next, or even go far as the movies. Like, what are some of the movies you think I should check out from his catalog, or you know what I mean. Any Christine. I haven't even talked about Christine yet. That's another good one. I'd be going on for days about his books. So many of his books have influenced me in so many ways, like influenced the way I read as well. So we're going to wrap this one up, everybody. I hope you've been enjoying the Skyler Jarvis Show. Again, put your ideas down in the comments. Get involved with the community posts. Anything you want me to know or talk about, drop them down there. So, without further ado, this is Skyler Jarvis signing off.
Ladies and gentlemen, Skyler has left the building. Hey, bro, don't you want to say anything?